Word Balloon is brought to you by AlexRossArt.com. You know Alex has worked for years in the comic book business, creating epic images from DC and Marvel's history, but also Star Wars, the Universal Monsters. And of course, in recent years, Alex has expanded into Hollywood with great prints featuring the Beatles, the Monkees, Monty Python, and a whole lot more. Go to Alex's website, AlexRossArt.com, and you will find prints, original art, and pieces that are priced at every price point, so you can find affordable Alex Ross art to grace your living room or man cave. There's also sketchbooks and art books, like last year's Alex Ross Unseen, featuring crossovers never seen before, like a Star Wars Star Trek piece, and several Star Wars DC Universe crossovers. It's all waiting for you at AlexRossArt.com. Hi everybody, welcome back. It's Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Really interesting conversation today with filmmaker and comic creator S. Craig Zahler. Now, you might know Craig from his most famous movie from about 5 or 6 years ago, and that is Bone Tomahawk. Great film with Kurt Russell, Matthew Fox, Patrick Wilson. A great Western that becomes a very gritty horror story. Really amazing stuff. He also made Brawl in Cell Block 99 and Dragged Across Concrete back in 2018. Craig has also written 6 novels and, in fact, has a brand new graphic novel, The Forbidden Surgeries of the Hideous Dr. Divinus. And that is what we're going to be talking about today. Craig has also made heavy metal albums and, in fact, has also done the soundtracks for his films. Really neat stuff. And it's a pleasure to talk to him because I've been a fan of his since Bone Tomahawk. And it's very interesting hearing about his comic book process. He's a longtime comic book fan. I think he proves his street cred in this conversation. We talk about a lot of the books that he grew up on, and that likely influenced his art, both in film and in writing as well. Craig Zahler, filmmaker and now comic creator, on today's Word Balloon. Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners through their efforts at Patreon, the crowdfunding source for monthly crowdfunding, patreon.com/wordballoon. That's my platform on Patreon. And Truly League, thank you greatly for your support. It was just under a year ago that I got booted from my radio job and wanted to see if I can make a go of it with Word Balloon, and I'm doing it really with your great support, and I can't thank you enough. It means a lot. It means very much to me that you think of Word Balloon enough to help keep things running, and it really is great. And I have only tried to, respond with even better content, and I think the last year is a good record of that. And it's going to be interesting when live events come back. I don't know what's going to happen to Word Balloon's video presentation, but you can always count on great stuff right here on video, on audio as well. And thank you very much for your support via Patreon, patreon.com/wordballoon. Thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners. The best is yet to come. Word Balloon is brought to you by Aftershock Comics. It's March, and man, let me tell you, Aftershock has got a fully loaded month of books for you to consider. Stephanie Phillips and Tony Chastain have a new series from Aftershock. It started at the end of February, Nuclear Family. Issue 2 comes out on March 31st, so make sure you grab those this month from Aftershock. Next, the new arc of Undone by Blood gets underway from Aftershock. Lonnie Nadler, Zach Thompson, and Sammy Kivella are the team behind Undone by Blood, expecting a Word Balloon from them sometime in March. Zach Thompson also, Lonely Receiver, the complete series, is something brand new that came out from Aftershock, and the complete series will be hitting stores on April 7th. Other things to look for in Aftershock's March calendar, I Breathed a Body. That will be Zach Thompson and A. McDowell. Man, Zach's on fire with a lot of these new series. That's in shops at the end of March. Order deadline March 8th to get in advance from your store. In addition to that, there was big news that just came out from Aftershock. Peter Milligan, the man behind Human Target, X-Force, X-Static. Well, he's got a brand new series with Inaki Miranda, and it's called Out of Body. It's a horror and mystery story. Man, you can count on Peter Milligan for entertainment every time out, and I'm very excited to talk to him about his new Aftershock series. For more information, you'll find full story descriptions, preview pages of art, and the diamond codes on how to order these books and more at AftershockComics.com. Really excited to get Zahler on the line, a filmmaker that has been delighting me for like the last 5 or 6 years, and now he has come out with his first graphic novel. And I'm going to let you say the title, Zahler, because I'm probably going to get it wrong. So, from a pronunciation standpoint,
the graphic novel is Forbidden Surgeries of the Hideous Dr. Divinus.
Okay,
but Divinus is a made-up name. So, if you said Divinus or one of the other pronunciations I've heard people give, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's made up, and then the other words are real, and that's how you say them. And it's a long title, and often I just refer to it as Divinus for short, rather than vomiting out that mouthful.
Well, I'll tell you, man, really cool graphic novel, and I really love your independent style as opposed to, you think of other people like Bernie Wrightson or some of the other guys that have delved in horror. I mean, this is a really great indie style that I'm not used to seeing horror this way, and I loved it. I think it was kind of really interesting and very stark in its own way and everything, and kind of even creepy from kind of a handmade sort of way. I'm blanking now. The British artist that Paul Grist who does all the like Kane, the British crime comics and stuff. I think I'm saying his name.
I don't know this, but it sounds like something I should look up after this interview and check out by your description.
But that's awesome, man. I'm glad. First of all, I've heard you say, or at least in description and press releases and stuff, lifelong comic book fan.
Oh, for certain. So let me just back up a bit, and thank you very much for the kind words about the book. In terms of the indie style, I mean, there is a direct parallel between that and the way I photographed Bone Tomahawk, insofar as there were real limitations going into the first one. And with Bone Tomahawk, which we made in about 20 days,
wow,
we did not have enough time to make that movie. And I designed the style of that movie, which is a handheld medium shot following the protagonist of each scene, which changes depending on the scene. Sometimes it's Arthur, sometimes it's Sheriff Hunt, sometimes it's Chicory. And then handheld over the shoulders of that person to sort of capture the scene, and then locked off wider shots to articulate the spatial relationships of everything. So that style is actually the same style I did Brawl in Cell Block 99 with, and it fit Brawl in Cell Block 99 much better, partially because that's a more... that movie is focused on a single protagonist for almost its entire duration, whereas Bone Tomahawk is an ensemble piece. And sometimes there's stuff that got a little lost in the mix, but that was a plan that I came up with prior to production, and was something that facilitated us doing it in that amount of time. Similarly, I drew a lot as a kid, and probably through the end of high school, and I had a decent portfolio going into college. And was pretty good with shading spheres and such. And then I got into film school, and although I studied animation there, my focus became more and more on directing and cinematography, and then after school writing, and my abilities as an illustrator did not improve and probably atrophied to some degree. So I needed to come up with a style that I felt I could consistently deliver to tell the story clearly, and I will certainly point to the book Wimbledon Green by Seth as as a touchstone. When I read that and looked at how simple the drawings were, Yet, if I were asked to pick my favorite comic put out in the last 20 years, it's definitely that one. Well, this used these simple, iconic images to tell this story that I feel is sort of in both its telling and scope, the Citizen Kane of comics. Although it's this little book and it's fairly lighthearted in most spots, it really showed me how much could be done with the right iconic imagery, and emboldened me to just do something that I knew I'd always wanted to do. I mean, putting out comics that I'd drawn and working on animated movies where I was a designer and animated are interests that go back to when I was 12, 11. Like those are some of the first things I ever wanted to do, and they never went away. There were just other things that came to the fore, such as writing movies, directing movies, making music, and writing novels. But I was really emboldened by Seth and some of the other Johnny Ryan's Prison Pit, some of this other kind of simpler stuff that, like, okay, I'm not going to be Brian Boland. So that is beyond me. I'm not going to be Richard Corbin. I have in the room next to the one I'm currently in, I have a wall that has Hal Foster and Chris Ware artwork. That's unachievable for me. I can't do that. In the room I'm in now, I have Ben Mara and Jack Kirby artwork hanging. That's also beyond me. It's all inspiring. It's stuff to strive towards, but I needed to. I did a bunch of practice art, and then I needed to get into a space where I felt like, okay, these images are clear. People can read this clearly, and this will tell the story in an immediate way where I don't need a bunch of expository text doubling up with all of the visuals that are presented.
Understood. And for your movies, do you storyboard, and do you? I mean, because okay, great. Because I wanted to know the language of storyboarding a film versus coming up with a comic. And as you say, you wanted a clear art style that would convey what you're going for and everything. Tell me about the similarities and the differences.
Yeah, when I storyboarded, it's funny, when I was a cinematographer, I would storyboard in much more detail because it was me talking with a director and drawing out stuff and to give them a clue what I was thinking, or if they were describing something and I was describing something slightly differently, we could see the differences. As a director, my storyboards are, really rushed and kind of sloppy. And in the case of the first two movies, there wasn't a lot of need to go and do it through every scene when, as I said, there was a very consistent plan of attack with these medium shots and over the shoulders.
Sure.
And then these wide shots that were locked off and articulating atmospherics. And that holds true for 90% of Bone Tomahawk and Brawl and Cell Block 99 hold to those rules. But the process is the same for storyboarding as it is essentially for doing thumbnails for comics. So Forbidden Surgeries of the Hideous Dr. Divinus took me about 5 months to do in terms of drawing it. And it's on 11 by 17 Bristol board. It's ink and white. It's very old school. Like I could, if I took all the folders with the original art and you read it, you would have the same experience, except you'd expend more calories flipping the big Bristol boards than you do flipping pages in a book.
I get you.
And so it's the thumbnail process is the storyboard process for me. And both of these connect to my process as a writer, which at this point, it's the thing I've done the most and the thing that I think I'm best at when I'm writing a novel or a screenplay or the short stories that became my first comic or the comic I am now in the final inking stages of my second one. And it's a process of visualizing the story. I get in the minds of the characters and then visualize the environment and go through it, and that experience is really the same. It's a storytelling experience, and it's an experience of what are the elements needed for this. And in the case of a movie, it's like, oh, well, we need a lamp here as a light source. And so that starts to become a big concern very early on when I'm doing breakdowns with my cinematographer, Benji Bakshi, who shot all 3 of my movies.
Oh.
We start looking at that in terms of where the light sources are going to be, camera placement, and what's possible if you have a bunch of guys jammed into the back of a van, where's space going to be for the camera. And with the case of a comic, it really comes down to, well, do I want to draw all this stuff? Can I draw all this stuff well? And the second of those options is more often the thing I think about. Can I draw this so that it's clear and that there's no confusion as to what I'm putting on the page? So those secondary concerns come in, in filmmaking, it's often lighting and where you're going to put the camera and blocking. And with comic art, after the thumbnail stage, there is the thought of, well, will I draw this lamp convincingly? Or if these 2 people are on this side of the panel and then they're walking left to right, should I have this other person enter through a door on the other side? So screen direction is something I'm very aware of in both mediums, and the overlap is a lot. Like, they're both. I wanted the comic to tell most of the story visually, and
sure,
dialogue is there, but there are some pages that have a lot of dialogue, but there's some pages that have very little or no dialogue.
Yep.
And I felt if you're using the medium really well, there should be a fair amount of panels that need no words to convey the story.
Totally. No, absolutely, man. No, and again, it reads really well. And also...
Thank you.
Absolutely, and it's very consistent. I haven't read your novels, but certainly watching your movies and stuff, people will be very pleased. I mean, it's definitely fans of really all 3 movies and stuff, I think will see a lot of similarities in terms of themes and just the way you go about these. I mean, I've got in the description of... and I think it would be more succinct to... do what Justin sent me, the PR guy that put me in touch with you. And it's people are disappearing in the streets of New Bastion, and occasionally a dismantled corpse turns up in a dumpster. These crimes are left alone until the day a comatose woman named Lillian Driscoll is kidnapped from the hospital. Her brothers, a grumpy detective named Leo and a slick monster named Tommy, seek answers that lead them to darkness, arcane medicine, and pain. And certainly, again, if I think that's familiar territory, certainly for the Bone Tomahawk people as well. It's kind of a modern day, look at almost the same kind of themes.
Absolutely, and that was, and that's one of the things that's interesting about playing in this medium is the idea of bringing some of those themes and ideas over, but then really exploiting what this medium has to offer. The film has the cut, and a comic book has the page turn, and
sure,
really trying to gear some of those. I don't think this is a real term, but I use it regularly. Trying to gear the shock panels to really have that moment of surprise and that jolt, and when you turn the page. Or look to the next panel, you really weren't expecting to see that. And I will certainly point to, the EC comics have been inspirations my entire life. When I was a little kid, I collected them.
That's great.
When I got back into collecting in my 20s, that was the thing that got me back into them. I have a Graham Ingalls original art with the old witch in the room, with the Chris Ware and Hal Foster art. So that's an ongoing inspiration. And I'll also point to the manga by Junji Ito, which I find incredibly effective. And sometimes I feel I can almost smell how gross that shit is. And that's really some incredible stuff. I'm thrilled that he, at some point, I don't know comic book number sales. I'm oblivious of a lot of that stuff. I can't even tell you how much money my movies have made. I can give some ballpark guesses. So I'm oblivious of a lot of that stuff. But the Junji Ito seems to really be doing well in this country, because it seems like every month there's something new available to buy of his, and that he has a good fandom here. And I think that's some of the best horror comic art I've seen, and I really enjoy his stuff. So that's a bit of a piece of the puzzle alongside the EC Comics and and Seth in terms of what got me going.
Well, you're really in the midst of a great period, I think, for horror comics as well. Not just the manga that you mentioned, but really, and also like you said, conveying the shock in comics versus in film. I think that is a tough trick visually to be able to do that in a comic book, and it takes a real good storyteller to kind of achieve those effects. And I appreciate the ambition and what you're trying to do with this stuff. And plus, it's just a good stark story that I think people will definitely enjoy. And again, it's in your voice. I mean, that's the thing. It's clear this is the same guy that made not only Bone Tomahawk but also your other films. And Concrete, Dragged Across Concrete, and Brawl in Cell Block 99. I mean, those are really cool things. It's interesting, man. It's been a pleasure becoming aware of your stuff in the last few years. Let's talk about your early love of comics. I mean, you've already touched on some things. What?
Sure.
Yeah. What? I mean, like you said, you were collecting the EC stuff. When did you start reading? What were your first comics? The whole schmear.
It's funny because this question has come up, so I can now be very specific with the answers. The first two comics I had that I read cover to cover, because there were probably some, I think a friend had some Richie Riches, and I probably saw some Riches. But I know the first two that I really had that I read and reread were Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 254. So I had heard about the black suit. I was a couple months late. I believe maybe it's 252, the first one with the black suit.
I'm a knucklehead when it comes to specific numbering, but I know the period you're talking about, Secret Wars and everything. Sure.
So I'd heard about the black suit. But this sounded amazing. This sounded amazing to me, so I needed it. And my mom bought me one. I think it has Hobgoblin on the cover.
Okay.
And so that issue was the first one, was one of the first, and I don't know which came first, that or the silent issue of G.I. Joe, which I probably, read 20, 30 times. And I recently reread it, and it's still really good. So those were at the beginning, and it was mostly horror or superhero comics. And so I read, I enjoyed Twisted Tales. I hunted down anything drawn by Richard Corbin.
Yeah.
And I was a big fan and remain a big fan of his. And, I had this, I ordered, and so this is a strange story. And I just thought of this recently. I just recalled this. So I really wanted all the Richard Corbin I could have. And at some point I wrote to him directly. And was, at the oldest, I was 13. I was probably 12. But on the young side to be reading a lot of the Richard Corbin material.
Yeah.
So I wrote him, and I got a letter back from Richard Corbin. And I believe it was written by him. Possibly it was written by his wife. But the whole thing was handwritten. And quite neatly, and it said, thanks for your interest and support and the kind words and all of that sort of stuff. We have the following books available directly from, whatever his press was called at that time. And so it was all written out, and there were all the titles there, and, whatever, Mutant World and Rolf and all the different things that he had. And the whole letter was written in pencil, but next to certain titles, Adults Only was written, and this was written in ink. And so that I couldn't erase Adults Only and then show it to my mother and then have her send a check in the mail for it. So I thought, looking back on this, first off, the fact that I'm getting a handwritten response is pretty amazing.
Sure.
And then second, that like there's this precaution of we're going to write adults only. That's going to be the only thing in ink on this entire letter, so that he can't erase it and then convince his mom to buy all these dirty comic books. So I had a box just set aside where I'd like stenciled Richard Corbin and Gore and all of this stuff on it, and it was loaded with his stuff. Similarly, Bernie Wrightson was someone I was tracking down.
Sure.
A lot of his work, and so I was reading the eerie, creepy, all of those Warren magazines, and then probably like very early on, Punisher and Conan. Conan's were probably like at that very beginning. I think there was a point where I was buying King Conan and Conan the Barbarian and Savage Sword of Conan. Like I had a lot of Conan going on, and I was a fan of the Robert E. Howard stories. So that was and remains to this day, a character I feel a lot of artists have done really interesting things with. I really like a lot of the Michael Fleischer written Savage Swords.
I'm with you.
And I mean, that, like I think there's good. There's a good case to be made that is it pronounced Buscema?
Yeah,
is it John Buscema?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard it said Buscema, but I always thought it was Buscema.
I mean, you're right. I've heard both as well, but I've always said Buscema as well.
Yeah, I think there's a good case to be made that, like, if Frank Frazetta had remained a comic book artist, that's sort of what his stuff would have looked like.
Yeah.
Obviously, Frank Frazetta became the amazing, cover artist, painter, and all those things. And I have a couple of small pieces by him. Certainly, I don't have any $1 million oils, but Buscema, I think, and I think also a good case to be made that after Kirby, he was the best of the mainstream Marvel DC guys. I just think his stuff's incredible. His form, there's just such a grace to it. The characters really sing, and the line work is incredible. But so a lot of that stuff, I think probably in terms of transitioning from a kid who was buying comics at the drugstore to a kid who had pulls at the comic book shop, which I grew up in Miami, so it was Coral Gables Comics off of Red Roads, and the transition was the Craven miniseries, Spider-Man miniseries.
Oh, sure, Craven's Last Hunt. Mike Zeck, right?
Yeah. That was the transition, and then sometime not long after, I got The Dark Knight Returns, and so then I became a lifelong comic reader. So those are really probably the two that made it more. Well, I mean, in both cases, you need to get all of the issues. Like some of this other stuff, you can read any issue of Savage Sword of Conan out of context, and it's fine. You can read a lot of that Conan stuff, and it's fine. Wolverine, Spider-Man, a lot of the typical stuff you could just read an issue and it was all there. And I think there's a value to that. I wish that more comics attempted that today.
I agree.
But the ones that really hooked me were these miniseries events. Sure. And the Circle of Blood, that first Punisher miniseries.
Yeah.
Obviously, I like Mike Zeck as those are two of the key ones for me, and a lot of that really, that Craven's Last Hunt, that Punisher miniseries, which I think I've reread that as an adult. I think it's pretty good. I don't think it ranks at all with Craven's Last Hunt or certainly Dark Knight Returns. But the Nam was really popular when I started reading.
Yeah,
and not many artists working at the skill set of Michael Golden. That guy is like the perfect balance of like cartoonishness with three-dimensional figures that you can still sense the shape of, and they had like solidity and weight, but there was also this cartoonishness at the same time that really made it sing. Like I don't know anyone, maybe Art Adams at his peak.
Sure.
Who was working quite in that zone. So as a kid, obviously I gravitated towards certain artists right away and certain characters. Punisher and Spider-Man and Batman were big ones. And hey, I mean, as someone reading from 80, like who had comic book pulls from 86 onward, that was a good time to be a Batman fan.
Damn right.
Like getting year one and year two as they're coming out, and
Paul Galassi when he was doing it, sure. That mid-80s period, yeah.
And then Jim Starlin. It's funny. I'm a huge Jim Starlin fan.
Sure.
He's probably right behind Kirby and Miller in terms of the mainstream, like Marvel DC guys, in terms of all-time favorites. He would probably be my number 3 behind Kirby and Miller. And I just adore his work, whether he's writing and drawing. But it's interesting because, like, people think of the Starlin Batman and they think of the death of Robin, which
family,
I think is okay. Yeah, I think that's okay, but I think his run, particularly the 10 Nights of the Beast and all the issues that came after that, I think that stuff is great.
Yeah.
Like that's the stuff that I really responded to. The Death in the Family seemed like, okay, we've got to do this. And it's the thing that I try, as a person who kills many of his fictional characters, I come from the place of get in their minds and don't look down on them and don't want them to die. Like, I don't come from that place. It's one of the reasons whether you're dealing with a problematic cop or a former boxer in jail or a dude who's lost his wife, like, get in their mindset and sympathize with them, even if they don't have your views. And you don't get that with Death in the Family. Like, this was written by a guy who didn't like that Robin and wanted to kill him. So that it doesn't make for almost all, if not all, the Jim Starlin I've read outside of that. There's more pathos, and it's not just here's an irritating pipsqueak we're gonna kill. But a lot of that like I enjoyed Dreadstar back in the day, and recently through these omnibuses or omnibi. I'm not sure what the plural of that word is. But through all these, I've reread that entire series, and man, that's probably top 10 Hall of Fame for me. I just think that is, it's kind of everything great about science fiction comics and everything great about superhero comics put into one with all of Starlin's interesting philosophy and like teeth gnashing emotion. It's just great stuff. So, probably a longer answer than you wanted.
No, not at all.
Probably only a fraction of the stuff that I read. And, it's interesting because Punisher, I feel there was a Punisher story I wanted, and I read a lot of Punisher. That was certainly on the poll list. And I don't know, and I don't think that Punisher story ever happened until Garth Ennis started writing it. Like, the Punisher story that I thought should exist didn't exist until, decades after that character was created. So that was interesting, kind of reading some of those things. Oh, this was sort of the Punisher that I always wanted, but yet never quite existed.
Interesting. Because really, I loved when Mike Barron was writing him. I loved when Chuck was writing him, Dixon, and I agree with you with Garth. Garth's stuff is amazing. Jason Aaron, I think, had a great run on Punisher. I mean, really, it's I get the controversy given what's happening in the world today, but at the end of the day, it's a fictional character. I'm like, I don't understand. Like, when I was reading, this is me saying this, by the way. When I was reading things like in Time Magazine, maybe it's time to retire the Punisher, and it's like, come on, everybody, it's a fictional character. I mean, I don't like. I had Jerry Conway on last summer talking about the controversy that the Punisher now finds himself in, and Jerry's. I think, again, I don't think he makes any apologies for creating the character. I think when you take a villain and turn him into an anti-hero sometimes, that can get problematic. But I do think the Punisher, I mean, he's a psycho. I mean, he is a psycho. That's kind of the point of the character. He's not a normal person. He's a damaged man that's out there.
Sure.
And then there's nothing wrong with reading about damaged people. I mean, that's so I whatever. But yeah, it's an interesting time for the Punisher, and I think Marvel isn't sure what to do. Declan Shalvey and my buddy Ed Brisson were about to start a new story arc, and a combination of COVID and the culture wars kind of, I think, put the story on ice.
Yeah, I'm less in touch with all of that stuff. I knew that there was something about it, but really, I like what you just said is more than I already even knew. I found the Garth Ennis stuff really kind of amazingly nasty. And with the recent one that he wrote, Soviet, maybe being my favorite of the bunch, and amongst the nastiest, if not the single nastiest thing I've read that has either Marvel or DC on it. That's really a pretty hideous piece, but it's extremely well plotted. And yeah, I mean the character is a sociopath, and this is his journey, and you can go on it or not, but certainly. I mean, again, like I get to deal with this with my movies and books as well. Like, you find it compelling or you don't. If you think that art exists to show the best of what human beings can do and aspire to, go make that art and go enjoy that art.
Sure.
That's not what everyone thinks. It's certainly not what I think. To me, a lot of interesting stuff will be multifaceted and will have that, you might have that bit of light amongst the darkness or the opposite. But, yeah, I'm not fully aware of what's going on at like the big two insofar as them dealing with cultural wars and all that sort of stuff. I just buy what I hear is interesting, or if it's made by a creator that I enjoy.
I hear you, man. Well, I meant to ask about Western comics and what you enjoyed. I mean, I imagine you're a Jonah Hex fan.
I'm a Jonah Hex fan. Yeah, the Fleischer stuff, I just read that they put out that first omnibus. So that's something that, in general, I like Michael Fleischer stuff. I find there's usually an edge to his stuff, whether it's Conan or that really bizarre Spectre.
I was going to say, I love the Spectre run with Jim Aparo. That stuff's amazing.
That stuff is incredible, and
yeah.
That's really just. I mean, it's also like, from a creative standpoint, here you have a guy, you have a character hero in quotation marks who can do essentially anything. So how do you frame stories where you have an omnipotent character? And I guess the way you do it is that person creatively murders people, and that was the answer in the case of that. That was the answer in the case of that Spectre stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't read as many. I haven't read a ton of Western comics. That's something like
okay.
I recently picked up, but have not read a Blueberry collection.
Mobius,
the Mobius stuff.
Yeah,
yeah. I know people really relish that. But I've read. Outside of Jonah Hex, I'm trying to think of one that I read where I read more than a couple of issues and found it sort of dull. If you have any recommendations for well-written Western comics, I'm all ears.
Well, the Italian comic Tex, the various artists that have done that have been amazing. And Joe Kubert's Tex is absolutely worth reading. Joe Kubert speaks for himself, as far as his greatness. But I really loved, did you read the modern Hex, Jonah Hex, that Jimmy Palmiotti and Justice Gray were writing? And they just got every great artist to do an issue here or there. And it's terrific because they were mostly one-shots as far as storytelling and stuff. And I just felt like they really got the best of the best artists. And Palmiotti, being an artist himself, I think, and a guy that's been respected for years for his art, and knowing everybody in the business as he has, was able just to tap these really great people. And Darwin Cook did one, and immediately comes to mind.
I read that one.
There you go.
I read that one, and I enjoyed it. I'm a Darwin Cook fan and have
Me too.
Almost everything that he's done, and a page of New Frontiers on my wall as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, yeah, I think that's one of the that and Identity Crisis for me are real high water marks for DC in the last 20 years or so. Those are really spectacular books. I'll look into that. So the other one that you mentioned, it's Tex.
Yeah, Tex, and it's Joe Kubert drew it. I would pick up his softcover volume or hardcover volume of his Tex stories. They're short. I mean, they're little interludes, kind of in the vein of Lieutenant Blueberry and stuff. Yeah, I think that's been some of the best stuff. Chuck Dixon has always written really good westerns, I think, over the years. I'm trying to think of other. Certainly if you want to go back to the Golden Age and stuff, you got great artists like John Severin, and his stuff, his Western stuff was always beautiful. I'm a big Mort Meskin also. I mean, that's the thing. I really think war comics and Western comics, there have really been some amazing, books done for decades. And Mort Meskin is a great Golden Age artist. He created the Vigilante, and a lot of his Western stuff is just beautiful to look at. And I'm a big fan of that stuff.
Was he doing any? That name is familiar. Was he doing any stuff for like the Harvey horrors and that? Was he in that camp or no?
That I don't know, because it's funny. We Tom King brought up the Harvey horror stuff last night when we were talking about Black Cat. I'm not sure, and I'll tell you that the stuff of Harvey's from the 40s and 50s. I'm not as well versed on. It's funny when you mentioned Richie Rich, because as much as I loved action comics and stuff, I had my buddies that loved Richie Rich and stuff. So I certainly read my share of Richie Rich. So it's kind of funny, and then that's really more the Harvey shit that I read when I was a little kid.
Right. I wonder, because I've gone back in the last couple years. Let me read a few volumes of Archie. So I read some Archie from the very beginning, like the earliest Archie, which was fairly tedious. And then some of the Dan DeCarlo stuff, which is breezy and fun. I mean, right. I'm not going to spend a ton of time reading it, but it sort of delivers the lighthearted hanging out in high school, minor misadventures, that I was expecting. But Richie Rich, I have a feeling if I return to that now, that would be fairly grim. I don't have high expectations, so I don't know that I want to go back there. But if there were some a highlight edition, I might check out a tale. But I say this as a devoted Duck fan with I've got like 20 volumes of Donald Duck in the room that I'm in. So awesome. I've got no problems with that sort of stuff. And in fact, I really relish the Carl Barks and Don Rosa Duck stuff. But Richie Rich, I think, I don't know that one is aging particularly well for me.
I understand, but again, it's it's more about you love the simplicity of Ernie Cologne's art, things like that. But those stories are like you said, they're pretty grim. That's a good description. Right. Yeah, it is Paul Grist that I mentioned before, who does great crime comics, and Kane was his crime comic books, and then also he had a hero called Jack Staff that essentially looks like Marvel's Union Jack, and I'm not sure which came first, but essentially those are his two big books and everything. But Kane is great, good hard-boiled stuff. I think you'd really like it.
Okay, I'm going to check that out.
There you go.
Sounds good.
Excellent. And tell us about the next graphic novel you're working, at least from a genre standpoint. What do you plan to do for your next book?
It's plan to do. I am 12 of 14 months deep in on this one.
Oh, damn.
I started writing. Yeah, Well, I wrote the whole thing. It's all drawn with pencil. And I have, let me see, inking page 132 of 182. So
That's
it's
great.
It's a large scale sci-fi piece. The art style, I think the art is quite a bit better. Certainly it is not, it doesn't look like a Marvel or DC book or anything like that, but it's the kind of thing like, I'm able to do more, and I just have a greater awareness of stuff. I'll say in no small part, there's a YouTube show called Cartoonist Kayfabe. Are you aware of this show?
Of course, no. Ed and Jim, Jim's a good friend, and Ed's been on the show a couple times. He's been on Word Balloon. I love those guys; they're amazing.
Okay, so that show, I could say I probably learned more about comic tools and techniques and stuff from that show. I've learned more about how to do comic art than I learned about how to make movies in any probably 2 or 3 courses that I took at NYU combined.
That is so great, man. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like there were times I was literally working on something and having a problem with the perspective, or one really specific time, it's like, oh, wow, if it's from this perspective. And that's one of the things that really came to me more in this second book, is just getting a lot of the human proportions better. And some of that was hearing those guys talk about it on Cartoonist Kayfabe. And then also just a much better sense of perspective. And I understand it. I mean, there are perspective drawings that are correct in the first comic, but there are nuances that I wasn't getting.
Okay.
But I remember a day where I realized, I'm like, no matter what, this just keeps looking wrong. And I realized I'd drawn the curve of the eyelid the wrong way, so that the perspective of the eye was slightly different than that of the head. So kind of a small thing to realize. And then that day I was listening to Cartoonist Kayfabe at the end of my workload, and Ed Piskor is talking about the exact same thing, the curve of the eyelid and the perspective. So that felt kind of nice that had happened at the same time. But there's just a ton of information I got from that. So there's going to be a lot of progress insofar as the consistency. I think the figures look better.
Okay.
I've gotten better. The story is huge. It's a gigantic science fiction piece, and it's the kind of thing, like, I started writing it a year ago to the day. And then I took off a couple of weeks, and then I started drawing at the end of May, and I've been drawing 25 days a month since the end of May till now. And I have probably about 2.5 more months of inking to do, and then fixing up some of the earlier artwork that doesn't quite land with some of the later stuff. And it's been a massive undertaking, and probably no better time for doing this amount of work of this type than the pandemic. I mean, other than seeing my girlfriend a handful of times each month, this has been my life. I wake up and I go to the drawing board and I work on it. I'm nocturnal, so I wake up at around 1, and I go to the board and I work from about 1:30 to usually 11:30 at night. And that's my day, and that's been the majority of days for me for the last year, and it's very, very satisfying. Like, there's a part of me that always wanted to return to drawing, and responses to the first comic book have been really nice and actually better than I expected, which was also the case when Bone Tomahawk came out there. It's just like, oh wow, people are really getting this different thing that I'm doing. And that's nice stuff to hear while you're actually working on the next one. And it's an art form that I've always loved. So I really like having. I want to have a little catalog.
Sure.
I have 9 albums to my name. I have 6 novels. I've got 3 movies that I wrote and directed, 2 others that I wrote. And as soon as I had the first comic and it was done, and I knew that people could understand it, and I hoped that people would enjoy it, I just started thinking about what the next one would be. And because I want to have a body of work in this field. It's just too dear to me to not have several pieces out in it.
Well, congratulations, man, because really you're a renaissance man. I'm glad you mentioned your music. I wanted to ask you about that as well. And much like John Carpenter, you've scored your films, which is pretty cool. And I really I'm gonna have to check. I'm not a metal guy. I won't I won't even pretend. But it's that's great, and I am intrigued to hear more of your music beyond what I've heard in your movies. So that's cool. And also what you just described about the pandemic. I'm living the same life, man. I mean, I'm a broadcaster. I got downsized during the pandemic, but turned to the podcast, and things are going well. Thank God. I got nice support from my audience, and that's cool. But no, I understand, and I love that you're stretching your other creative muscles and doing these other things, and I think that's great. What is in line for a next movie? I mean, have you got anything that you're in, whether it's in the back of your head or I don't know how much you can multitask in terms of these projects?
Well, insofar as the next movie, I have 3 different scripts that are written that are going around. I have one which is called Hug Chicken Penny, the panegyric of an anomalous child, but you can just say Hug Chicken Penny, or you can just say Hugs. And so that's this Dickensian orphan tale with that's kind of shot through with a David Lynch like weirdness, and that's a novel of mine that's out there in this very different than all of my other pieces. Though actually a little bit of overlap to the comic, insofar as some of the period stuff, some of the Victorian era stuff that appears in the comic. There's a little overlap to that. Okay. And so that project, I recently was able to get fully cast, so it's some familiar faces from my other movies, and then a few new big names involved. And now we're at the point of trying to get financing for that, but it's difficult. I mean, the reality of that piece is it's well over 3 hours. We're partnered with the Jim Henson Company, and the lead character is going to be an animatronic puppet. Wow! So it's not. I haven't gone down this specific road insofar as all of the challenges that are specific to this piece. But we had Bone Tomahawk with Kurt Russell going around in the system for a long time before we got the money for it. Wow. And you would think like, oh, it's Kurt Russell, it's a Western. And we were able to get some financing, but in the end, for us to make it and make it the right way, it was difficult. And the right way, I'm sure some people will find this arrogant. For me, the right way is where I have artistic control, because I'm not interested in making the movie where I give it over. I've had, since making these movies, I've had studio offers and offers to come direct things for other people, and I've turned all that down. I want to make my own original stuff. And at some point, I would be happy if there were an interesting television show to come in and direct some episodes and go. But in terms of the 1 to 2 year time commitment of making a movie, I want it to be something that I conceived. So Hug Chicken Penny is one of the pieces that's going around. Fury of the Strong Man is one of the pieces that's going around, and that's a 70s period piece with a circus strongman and a whole lot of bad happenings. And then I have another horror piece. And they're all at various stages. Like Hug Chicken Penny is fully cast. We have a great cast with value, but that doesn't mean the algorithms are going to be kind in terms of people financing it. So I continue to push all of those, and that doesn't interfere with me doing my comic work, because all of those pieces are written, and I have a 4th piece on the back burner. That is a gigantic Western that would need to be streaming, because I'm not going to, I might ask people to sit through a 2-hour and 15-minute movie in the theater. I might ask people to sit through a 3-hour movie in the theater. I'm not going to ask people to sit through a 5.5-hour movie in the theater. That to me is the point at which you say, this is going to be for streaming, or cut in half as 2 movies, but probably streaming would be better, so someone has the option to watch it all at once. So I have an enormous Western like that. Again, it's already written, so that will be on deck if if I'm not able to make some of these happen. And then I sort of have another plan in terms of a lower budget thing if I'm not able to get these, because the releases of these of all three of my movies have been small, and there hasn't been much promotion. So it'll always in play are the elements of the stars that are in it and their value, my ability to deliver something, and then someone's ability to market it. So I've got a bunch of irons in the fire, and it's still probably going to be some months until I know what my next one is. But those all of those exist. And then there's a Western that I actually adapted from an old Western novel that is not something that I'm planning on directing, but I hope to have an announcement about that soon. We've got some nice momentum on that as well. So a bunch of different things that could potentially happen. And I hope in the next few months there's an official announcement and I know what's going on. To be honest, I was never interested in trying to shoot with all of the pandemic restrictions. Okay. All of my movies, I've struggled with the parameters of budget and time.
Sure.
And so adding a bunch of people afraid that they're going to get COVID and everyone wearing masks and stuff like that. And my girlfriend is a massage therapist and in the wellness field. So I've always been at the forefront of being very cautious with stuff in terms of, wearing masks and,
Sure.
putting the mail in piles. I've been more cautious than the average with all that stuff. And being on a movie set where all of those precautions are held to, and you flush a third to 40% of your budget down the toilet for those things, that never seemed very appealing. So I'm just looking, for in the post-vaccine world where things are safer and that's not a concern. The idea of rushing into production and we're dealing with all of these restrictions was never appealing to me.
I can appreciate that. And also I'm curious regarding filmmaking in this streaming world and really the leaps that have happened in the last 5 or 6 years. And obviously you were maybe already playing in that world. And as you said, things like Bone Tomahawk, all your movies, limited release as far as theaters, but now it seems, the real place to find a lot of this stuff is online. And I wondered, as you said about creative control, because there are more players involved, because of the streamers actively producing this stuff, as well as the various film production companies, are you finding it easier to get the creative control you're looking for, or is it still kind of a struggle?
I don't know that it's any easier or harder. I mean, the reality is I'm taking around a package, which is a script, myself, and a bunch of actors who have a value level. And then it comes down to, I took a package in at one point that had a strong cast and a script I believed in to Netflix. And they liked the package a lot. They liked the script. And but they're let's say it's the algorithm, assuming that the people were being truthful. They said there's not an audience for this.
Interesting.
So some of that is that experience where people are driving their product by what they feel like what the audience is, what the appetite is. And that certainly makes sense from a business standpoint. It's not how I've ever done anything. It wasn't like, people are clamoring for me to go do an indie looking horror comic. Like, there's no one in the world asked for this.
Sure.
And no one in the world asked for a 2-hour and 12-minute Western that gets nasty with cannibalism and has extended scenes about people talking about reading a book in the bathtub. Like this fusion of my interest in, Cassavetes and art house and Sidney Lumet and art house movies with my interest in, rough horror genre stuff.
Sure.
Like the Lucio Fulci, John Ford combo that no one ever asked for. So my interest is, my belief has always been, because I launched my career with a Western. I had my career as a screenwriter. I had a Western called The Brigands of Rattleborge, and I spoke to Steven Spielberg about it. Martin Wolk has been on board. Most of the A-list Hollywood actors at some point have been involved with this piece, like really most of them.
Okay.
If you name the top 10 actors, probably like 6 of them have been involved with that piece at one time. And it never got made. And it's extremely violent. It has 60 to 70 minutes of just watching a small town be a small town, talking about shaving and pies and birthday cake and stuff like that.
Okay.
And then it switches. And so no one asked for that, but my belief is if you make something interesting, it will make its own audience. And it makes sense, people to studios in a lot of places are risk averse. And what they want is something similar to something else that has already been successful.
Yes.
And it's not because they're stupid. Like, that's an oversimplification to say that people in Hollywood are stupid. Like, this isn't the case. I talk to many people who are very smart, but they're coming at this from a business standpoint of this thing already made money, so we need something like that.
Absolutely.
So if I'm going around with my black and white 3-hour and 15 movie about an orphan, and that orphan is going to be an animatronic puppet, guess what? There isn't a lot of proof that has an audience. So it becomes difficult. It becomes difficult to make, as there was, no one in the world believed we could make Bone Tomahawk for less than $12 or $10 million, and we made it for 1.8 in 20 days.
That's great.
That's not the ideal. That's not the ideal way to make that movie, but it is a way to get it done, and it's the way that we got it done. And so there's that you're constantly dealing with, which is, how are you looking at your stuff? Are you looking at, like, this is what I want to put out, and I hope people like it, which is where I come from. And although you'll find many articles that say I'm the dude who doesn't give a shit what anyone thinks about his art and blah, 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 I want people to like my stuff,
sure,
but I'm not coming up with stuff thinking, oh, people will like this.
I get it.
I'm coming up with stuff, delivering it, and hoping that people like it. Like, it's meaningful that you enjoyed my comic. It's meaningful when I read reviews of a book of mine or a movie or a comic or an album, and I see that people like it. But it's not, I'm not looking at all of that and saying, how do I make another one of these that delivers to these same people? Because that's an outside looking in as opposed to an inside going out process.
Understood. And honestly, I really, this is what you're saying, I think is really fascinating. And, I'm a broadcaster, been in broadcasting for 30 years, and all the various changes because of not only COVID, but even the introduction of streaming and stuff. I think it's fascinating where everything is right now. Are you still there? Did I lose you?
I think we got cut off when you were telling me about your background in broadcasting.
Yeah, no problem, man. I just want to make sure it's still recording here. Hold on one second.
Sure.
There we go. Okay, good. It is still recording.
You certainly
Excellent.
have the cadences and patterns of someone with that experience.
I hope not in a jive sort of way, but I appreciate
no,
you
in an easy to talk to and listen to way. As I said, I started. I've been checking out your show.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's enjoyable. Anyway, you were saying.
No, you're very kind, man. And honestly, like I said, I've enjoyed your work as well. But I am fascinated by what's going on right now in entertainment and storytelling. And truly, as you said, I understand the people with the money want to make sure that, there's going to be a profit at the end of the day. It is a profit creative endeavor, and it's great that luckily the democratization of technology might make it easier for people like yourself to make these things. Especially from a movie and TV standpoint. And like you said, God, only $1.8 million for Bone Tomahawk. That's incredible. And such a short shooting schedule as well. My God. So, I mean, I'm hoping that you'll find the right people to finance these things. And also, in the meantime, you're writing your novels. I see your novel is coming out later this year. Your next book, the Slanted Gutter. Correct?
Yes, actually, that came out just last week. So that is
that's great.
Yeah, that's newly out there as well.
Fantastic, man. No, and again, looking forward to the sci-fi comics. So that's terrific. Hey, we've gone an hour. I don't want to take too much more of your time, and just want to say thank you very much for talking. And again, everybody, it's Forbidden Surgeries of the Hideous Dr. Divinus, and it's from Floating World Comics. It's fantastic, and truly, again, I think a lot of the people like Seth and Joe Sacco and that kind of independent world of comics, it's a great from a visual standpoint. I think that sits really nicely. Like I said, Paul Grist as well, and just a really cool noir horror that gets ugly, and it should, because it's in the hands of Zahler, who's already shown us how he celebrates ugly in very cool ways. So it's a pleasure, man, to talk to you, and I appreciate you doing the conversation today.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'd be happy to talk to you again. It's always for whatever reason, I just enjoy talking about comics more than most things. And well, I think one of the reasons it's like I've been writing down things I need to look up and buy after we get off the phone. So that's fun, because most of the people who are really, I mean, if you're really into movies, there's a canon of, 1,000 movies that everyone should have seen, and
Sure.
it's much larger. But with comics, people go down their avenues, and down those avenues into narrower streets, into narrower alleyways, and then they just discover all these little gems. And in recent years, discovering like indie artists like Pat Eligio and Lale Westwind and Ben Mara and folks like that, and really enjoying their stuff, while at the same time digging deep and reading Gasoline Alley and Floyd Gottfredson, Mickey Mouse, and that I think that Tom King vision, and that up in the sky Superman, those are deserving of the accolades that they got. So and even like that Donny Cates Venom. I'd never read any Venom that I thought was that good until I read that Venom. So there's a lot to explore, and it's enjoyable having these conversations, because I often learn about new things, and then I check those things out and continue to explore those avenues. So thanks for having me on, and thanks for your kind words regarding the book. It's meaningful that a diehard comic reader enjoys those, and I hope that other people do. And I'm hard at work on my second one, and nearing the end of that process as well. Yeah,
well, it was a real pleasure, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd probably at some point you're like, oh shit, this guy really is into comics. It's because like obviously most people know me from the heard of me through the movie stuff, and it's like, oh man, this guy is really deep with the comics. So I spend a lot more time reading comics than I do watching movies.
Very interesting talk with Craig Zahler. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you did as well. Busy day here at Word Balloon, also releasing a new conversation with David Walker. A long time coming, a one-on-one with David. I've been a fan of David's for a long time, and it's great. We were going to talk with him and Sanford Green about Bitterroot coming back. It's going to come back next week, but we ended up talking a lot, just me and David. Sanford couldn't make it, but that's okay, because there was plenty to talk about. We talk about David's years as a film critic, his love of old movies, as well as talking about his books, whether it's Shaft, Naomi, Young Justice. He's been doing a lot. His collaborations with Sanford and Chuck Brown on Bitterroot, and also Power Man and Iron Fist. It's all in there as far as this really fun conversation with David Walker. So I hope you'll listen to that. Also being released today. And of course it's Thursday, so expect conversations about The Outer Limits with Gabe Hardman late night on Thursday night on the Word Balloon's YouTube channel. And also a great conversation, hopefully, with my ringside seat buddies. They're a little concerned about the weather, and sometimes the internet gets knocked out. Crazy stuff. Justice League drops today. I started watching it. I look forward to incorporating that in conversations in the days ahead. And of course, Falcon and Winter Soldier coming up as well. It's a very interesting pop culture week, and I'm glad to be presenting some great conversations surrounding those and other topics right here on Word Balloon. I hope you'll join us. Word Balloon is brought to you by Aftershock Comics. It's March, and man, let me tell you, Aftershock has got a fully loaded month of books for you to consider. Stephanie Phillips and Tony Chastain have a new series from Aftershock. It started at the end of February, Nuclear Family. Issue 2 comes out on March 31st, so make sure you grab those this month from Aftershock. Next, the new arc of Undone by Blood gets underway from Aftershock. Lonnie Nadler, Zach Thompson, and Sammy Kivella are the team behind Undone by Blood, expecting Word Balloon from them sometime in March. Zach Thompson also, Lonely Receiver, the complete series, is something brand new that came out from Aftershock, and the complete series will be hitting stores on April 7th. Other things to look for in Aftershock's March calendar, I Breathed a Body. That will be Zach Thompson and A. McDowell. Man, Zach's on fire with a lot of these new series. That's in shops at the end of March. Order deadline March 8th to get in advance from your store. In addition to that, there was big news that just came out from Aftershock. Peter Milligan, the man behind Human Target, X-Force, X-Static. Well, he's got a brand new series with Inaki Miranda, and it's called Out of Body. It's a horror and mystery story. Man, you know, you can count on Peter Milligan for entertainment every time out, and I'm very excited to talk to him about his new Aftershock series. For more information, you'll find full story descriptions, preview pages of art, and the diamond codes on how to order these books and more at AftershockComics.com. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2020. Stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.